Yeah, so Hockey Stack looked across 50 plus B2B SaaS companies, 1.5 million contacts, and they found to get from I've never heard of you to an MQL, which we would define as an inbound demo request, is 54 touches on average. And to get from I've never heard of you all the way to close one, the number was, I believe, 81, but it depends on your ARR size. If your or your total contract value, if your TCV is like over 80,000, that number goes up to 121, and we're over 100,000, so we're right in that category.
But first, this episode is brought to you by Convert.ai. Convert.ai helps B2B SaaS and services hit their growth records. For the past decade, they've helped companies from YC, A16Z, seed, Series A stage companies, all the way up to the likes of BitGo, Adecco, Microsoft, SEMrush, Coke, hit growth records by handling their end-to-end demand generation. If you're interested in working with a partner that handles your end-to-end demand generation and actually works on a performance basis, putting their skin in the game to help your company grow, get in touch. The domain name is Convert.ai, and the link to book is convert.ai/book. With that out of the way, let's move on to the show.
Welcome everyone to the show. We talk about growing, building companies, services, and SaaS companies. Today we have Chuck Moxley on the show. Chuck, welcome. It's good to have you.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
I just want to talk about your extensive background, your expertise, your experience growing and owning marketing for first an agency for, I believe, a decade, and then 6 SaaS companies. Maybe give us your abridged, your Reader's Digest version of your backstory.
Sure. So technically went to school for computer science and started out in computer software and then training. But I eventually found my way into marketing, which is my first love, and first at the client. And then I spent 10 years in an agency or agencies where I worked on major consumer brands, and then went to a .com back in the .com days. And that was my first B2B SaaS company. I've now done 6 of those as head of marketing. And very often I'm coming in at the point where they're really building out a marketing team and need to build out a marketing team and launching some of the first marketing efforts of the company.
Beautiful, beautiful. I know these days you have a very account-based focused, since you sell into a finite universe of accounts, and that requires a lot of creativity, resourcefulness, and out-of-the-box thinking. Before this show, we were talking about growing a media brand and how that helps to drive authority, trust, expertise with your audience, and stay top of mind. I think actually you were talking about the hockey stack statistic. It used to be the rule of 10 or the rule of 11, but what's the new hockey stack statistic that you were talking about in terms of exposures required?
Yeah, so Hockey Stack looked across 50 plus B2B SaaS companies, 1.5 million contacts, and those ranged in ARR from 5 million up to like $1 billion. So it was companies, probably anybody on this podcast or listening to this podcast would be in that category. And they found to get from I've never heard of you to an MQL, which we would define as an inbound demo request, is 54 touches on average. And to get from I've never heard of you all the way to close one, the number was, I believe, 81, but it depends on your ARR size. If your or your total contract value, if your TCV is like over 80,000, that number goes up to 121, and we're over 100,000, so we're right in that category.
That's a lot of touch points. Not only that, but those touch points need to be good ones, because every time anyone interfaces with your brand, it's you're basically the face of this entire company, and the degree of, everything's a proxy for how good your company is at delivering on its promise. Every post, every podcast, every bit of content that you release. What are the channels that you use in order to get a direct line to your audience and stay top of mind? We'll start high and then go deeper into each one of these.
You bet. So again, we think in terms of demand gen and demand capture, and I'm not going to get into the debate of demand. There's all kinds of debates on LinkedIn about is it demand gen or is it branding or whatever. But if you think in those two buckets, I call it the split funnel. So we, on the demand gen side, because nobody knows who we are, and most people are actually, I would say, problem unaware. Right? They're starting from a viewpoint. They've already got solutions. Our solution is not a rip and replace. We don't replace an existing existing solution. We work alongside all of their existing tech to give them answers to questions they can't get out of their current technology, which means they don't know they have a problem, that they're missing this. For example, I know I've got friction on my website. I know I've got site pages that are too slow or that have a problem. I intuitively know it's probably cost me revenue, but I have no idea how much. And I don't know how much each page is. One of the things we can answer is exactly how much revenue you're losing as a result of that by page. So you know if you've got 100 slow pages, maybe 8 of them are producing $8 million in revenue opportunity. All the rest are 200,000. Now I can focus on that. Well, companies don't even know they can do that, right? So we got to first make them problem aware that they are missing key data that's causing them to be inefficient in the way they go about solving the problems they're having. Then we have to make them solution aware. They have to hear a blue triangle that they've never heard of, right? So we've got to take them through that. And then we got to get them to where they start researching and then get to an inbound demo request. So for us, that's building that authority, building those points of view out there. So we built media brands. I think you touched on that, but we have a podcast. We have a newsletter. So podcasts, obviously we can get out on the podcast platforms. We have guests that we interview very often on the newsletter. So we're using social media to promote those episodes. Their audience is also hearing about it and coming over, checking it out. So that's one way we're building that awareness and getting people to start thinking about us in terms of frictionless, because the podcast is called the Frictionless Experience. Then we have our owned audience. So when people do give us their identification or subscribe to our newsletter, we can now talk to them with that under the Frictionless banner. On our website, then we have our demos, our demo videos that we call under the Frictionless Show, which is the total media brand. So we've got the media brand. And again, because we're talking ABM, so for companies to get maximum value out of our platform, they typically have to have 1 million people coming to their website a month. When we looked across the U.S., and we're focused right now on U.S.-based companies, there's about 1,500 companies in 9 verticals that make good fits for us total. So as we came into this year and we have a limited media budget, we actually narrowed that down to 478 that we thought had the best chance of converting. So we lopped off at the top, the really huge behemoths that are going to take 2 years to get in, find the right person and get a deal closed. And the very bottom that sometimes are a little bit edge cases where it's hard to justify our minimum purchase value or minimum purchase price. So we lopped that off, focused on 478. Now we use paid social, primarily LinkedIn, to go target the right people, because we got very specific titles we're trying to reach in 3 departments in the companies. We go target them, but we're often pitching the content. So we're pitching a podcast episode, or we're pitching a blog post that we've written on a particular point of view. So we're trying to get them to engage with our content. When we see them engage, we can then retarget them, especially if they come to the website. We can now retarget them, and we use channels like Google and Facebook and Meta platforms, because those are a lot cheaper than LinkedIn for retargeting. So we build that retargeting audience. And again, we can try to push them additional content. We have to get them. And what's great about Hockey Stack, which is a platform we use, is we can see what those impressions are they're getting in terms of ads. We can see when they're engaging with our content on social channels. And then we obviously see when they come onto the website. We can see by the company level, we can see by the person level as soon as they identify themselves. We can light up that whole path. And by the way, when we look at that, it's typically over 50 engagements. So we're right in that same data that Hockey Stack is seeing. So once we see them and we're retargeting, we're trying to get them to continue to engage with us and go from first impression to coming back multiple times, to then investigating, learning. So we look at what pages they're going to finally an inbound demo request. And we've got different media along the way.
Oh, no, super. I mean, this isn't easy. It's nuanced and highly complex. Do you use the media brand Frictionless in order to sponsor posts, sponsor podcasts, or is it all done under the corporate brand? What does that division look like between your media brand for the problem unaware, I'm guessing is where you use it mostly, and your corporate brand for the problem aware? That small sliver.
Excellent question. And people will do this in different ways. We chose to make Blue Triangle the sponsor of the media brands, but build the media brand as its own brand. So the frictionlessexperience.com is a standalone website. It's branded as such with a little logo on the upper right corner that says sponsored by Blue Triangle. And if they click there, they can come to the Blue Triangle site. So we do everything under the Frictionless Experience. And when it relates to the podcast, it makes it easier for us to find guests, because it doesn't come across as an endorsement. We're not asking them to come on and talk about Blue Triangle. Most of the guests we have are not customers, so they don't even know about it, right? In fact, on our prep call, our initial prep call, we actually tell them, hey, this is not to pitch Blue Triangle. This is to talk about the problem we solve. So we get that kind of that rub off factor, but we're not going to be talking about Blue Triangle. We're not expecting you to. And so that's been one of the benefits of keeping them separate. We find it easier to get guests who are not customers because it's not coming across as an endorsement. But we also think, we build audience out there who may not know who Blue Triangle is, and then we can start to educate them about that. On YouTube, we carry 2 separate channels. We have far more videos on the Frictionless Experience than we actually have on bluetriangle.com, on that YouTube page. Now, could we improve both those? Absolutely. We got a lot of work we're trying to do to use, and we try to bring over content. We'll write a blog post on our website, the Blue Triangle website, on a topic that was brought up in the podcast. So we'll say in the article, on a recent episode of the Frictionless Experience, so-and-so had this to say. And therefore, and of course, we're linking over to the Frictionless Experience. So we're trying to cross-pollinate and get people to sort of go both ways. I don't know if that's the smartest way to do it. That's how we chose to do it. We launched in October and we're recording this in September. So we're just under a year of doing this. So time will tell if we did it the right way, but I think so. I think if we had done everything under Blue Triangle, it would have mucked things up and confused people.
There's so much more to explore there. And I think it's early days for companies spinning out, SaaS companies spinning out their own media arms and then using those to generate awareness, thought, leadership, expertise, and have them fold into MQL's pipeline. I think that is the art here. How do we bridge those two things? And I think the cross-pollination is smart. So you'll sponsor posts that refer to Frictionless using the corporate brand, and the corporate brand will refer often to the Frictionless thoughts, insights, takeaways as value-add content for its audience. Maybe you sponsor those types of posts, it sounds like.
Yeah. We're definitely cross-pollinating. And again, what's interesting is we have actually more people subscribe to our Blue Triangle LinkedIn page than we do to the Frictionless Experience. Unfortunately, I would rather have that be reversed, quite frankly, because my philosophy on it is, and this is going to be an audience of one, coincidentally the name of my book, but this, I will listen to podcasts. I will find a podcast that I find interesting. I'm a huge podcast listener. On the weekends, I'll listen 2, 3, 4, 5 podcasts. And I will start listening to somebody's podcast because I really like the host and I like the guest and I like what they're talking about. I buy into it, and that will start. And eventually I'll research the brand behind it, but I may not be in a buying motion or a buying opportunity, right? I may not have budget. I may not, be at that cycle where we're ready to tackle that problem. I'll listen to that podcast for 6, 8, 9 months or more, knowing when I am in a buying decision, I will come check out that company. So my expectation is we don't know yet, since we're just under a year, we don't actually know the full value of the podcast yet because we don't know how many people are listening episode after episode and building that awareness. They're just not ready to buy. They're not in it. They don't have budget. They're not that, or they haven't even connected the dots yet. Over time, as they do, then they'll be thinking about us. And there's a lot of research that says in the B2B SaaS world with so much confusion, people do this research and they start identifying 3 brands or 3 solutions that when they have budget for X or when they're trying to solve problem Y, they're going to start with those 3. We want to be in that consideration set, and we think this gives us that opportunity to do that. And so that's why I lean in on the Frictionless Experience. I'd rather them subscribe to that. And every 2 weeks, they're getting notified by Spotify. They're getting, we take that newsletter that we do to our owned base and we repurpose it on LinkedIn as a LinkedIn newsletter. So we have another 500 subscribers on LinkedIn to that newsletter. So every 2 weeks, they're getting notified on LinkedIn. So I let LinkedIn do a lot of that work to get them to where they're engaging and they're hearing that and they go, oh, that's so-and-so from Walmart. That's Vijay Jayaraman from Walmart. He's going to talk, that sounds really interesting. Oh, that's Barry Pollard from Google. He's going to talk about Core Web Vitals. Let me go check that out. So I want them coming back. To me, that's spend money on media, right? On the rented channel to get them to the podcast and get them to start coming back. I don't have to keep spending money on them if I can figure out who they are. That's the challenge. So that's why we've leaned in on this. And again, for those listening, because I listen to podcasts and people go, well, I only have 22 people in my marketing team. And, so we have to divide up. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I can't relate. I don't have 22 people on my marketing team. And probably 90% of the people listening to this do not have 22 people on the marketing team. So for smaller companies, if it's any consolation, we have a very small budget, a very, very small budget. We are not, and that's why we had to be smarter. I believe no matter what your size, you should always punch above your weight. Even when I was with a company that was a $20 million company, when people encountered us and it was somebody at a level that I would have a conversation because we were private, and they would ask, well, you guys must be like $100 million. I'm like, no, we're like 20 million. I always want to look bigger than I am. And so things like a podcast professionally produced with the right graphics and stuff make you look like a much bigger player than you might actually be. And that doesn't cost a lot of money. It's not super expensive to produce a podcast. But so on a dollar for dollar versus if I put that into media or something else, it would be hard comparison. So anyway, I just want to make the point. You do not have to have a multi-million-dollar budget to do a podcast. And that buys you a ton of credibility.
Getting more with less. I think before the show, you mentioned you were very pipeline focused. So you're not an MQL driven marketer. You're a pipeline driven marketer, which is the stakes are raised, especially with a non-infinite marketing budget where you need to extract ROI on every penny you spend. You've got to get creative. I think before this, you mentioned that there's so many different directions. Let's go in this one. You mentioned you ungated all of your content recently. I'd love to learn more about what drove that decision and what's happened so far as an outcome as a result of it.
Sure. Well, and I think it's more than anything, it's the market changed, right? Because for years we ran a gated lead generation model, right? Very successfully. I have companies where I was generating 7,500 leads a year, right? Mostly gated content. In fact, I remember having this debate internally. Of course, we're going to gate it. I want to get that email address. And back then you could email people. You could actually get emails to deliver. You weren't going up against 300 emails a day that are all AI generated, right? And I think what happened was the world changed. So and again, I've used that playbook at many companies. I came into Blue Triangle, when we launched our marketing last January, we started with a more traditional gated model. And what we were seeing was we weren't getting quite the traction we were hoping. And it was costing us about 200 and I'll get this wrong. I should have the number. It's either 268 or 286. I always transpose the numbers per lead. And the problem was when we started looking at the email addresses, because, we think, okay, great, we'll get them on a follow-up sequence, a nurture sequence of some sort. We'll try to get them back, get them to the website, eventually get them more content. Well, the problem is about half the emails we were getting were completely bogus. There was people who wanted to get access to content, but they were putting like Joe at noneyourbusiness.com. And of course, any kind of follow-up sequence fails, right? It's completely useless. And so as we started looking at that, we're like, and there was so much talk on the internet at the time and on LinkedIn about, you got to engage your content. Chris, from, oh gosh, why can't I remember his name? Chris Walker of, something labs. I'm drawing a blank. I read his stuff all the time. Anyway, he was out there talking about, people were out there saying, there was the book that was done by the CMO of Sixth Sense that was called No Forms, No Spam, No something, right? Same idea. You're catching me at the end of the day and I can't remember any of these things that I've read. Anyway, so there was all this talk about that. So I went back to my head of domain gen. I said, let's test it. Let's just take this ebook that we've been out in the Q1. Let's take it. Let's do an ungated version of it. And let's just compare it for 2 weeks. We did 2 weeks of data. And what we saw was it dropped to $11 per engagement. We had to call it something else. It was no longer a lead because they weren't giving us their name. So we defined an engagement, and we were using software that presented the ebook like as a flippable, like a flip book, but would tell us how long they spend on it. So our philosophy on it was 30 seconds or 2 pages that they had to consume to call it an engagement. If they just hit it and bounce, we wouldn't count it. So we redefined that metric, but it went down to $11. And we were able to reach almost as many people in those 2 weeks as we reached in the first 6 weeks of the quarter. No, 12 weeks of the quarter, right? So that gave us enough confidence to give it a shot. So we started ungating all of our content. Today, we gate none of it. All of our content's ungated. And that allowed us, number one, last year, we increased our inbound demo requests by 265% by doing that year over year from 2022. And we think a big part of that was more people were learning about us. We weren't stopping them at that gate. And that's our challenge, right? If we've got, we're going after 478 companies this year, and we've got at every company anywhere from 20 to 50 people, we need as many of those people as possible to see our content, to start to understand our point of view and start to understand they've got a problem that they need to go solve and that we can solve it for them. So stopping them with that gate would work against our goal, and especially with a small media budget.
Totally different direction or tangential direction is since you're not collecting emails on that content and you're measuring if they're consuming it for the requisite, 2 pages or 30 plus seconds, how are you running attribution? Are you using Sixth Sense, Clearbit, Sixth Sense, or any of those types of tools that de-anonymize at the corporate level, or anything similar to that?
Yeah, we use Hockey Stack, which actually includes Sixth Sense data. So we've built reporting. So we changed our whole funnel, and the marketing funnel, and I don't want to go down that debate, but there's a lot of debate on marketing funnel. But the bottom line is, we don't think it's like this. I picture it as a football field, and I've written about this on LinkedIn, where it's a football field where you got to get the ball from this side of the field to the other, across the goalpost, right? And on there, and the great part about a football field is, when in a football game, the ball goes this way and then it goes back this way and then it goes that way and that's kind of a sail, right? They get to a point, they suddenly go dark, they kind of go back this way and then they light up again. You get them a little bit farther down and then they get hung up on pricing. Then you go a little bit backwards and then they get hung up on a POC, right? So it's in my mind, the football field was a great analogy for that. So we relayed that out and we redefined our goals, because we stopped at that point, and I went back to exec team. I said, we're no longer going to report leads or MQLs. We're going to get rid of the word leads completely out of our vocabulary. We're going to show you these stages. We're going to show you our target, who we're going after. We're going to show the first time they come and engage at our website. We'll then track when they come back multiple times. So either it's the same person coming back multiple times or multiple people from the same company. That's the next phase. Then we're going to track, are they in a research phase, meaning going to certain pages like product pages, request a demo page, things like that indicate a higher level of intent and interest and evaluation. So we put them in that evaluation phase. Then we're going to have a demo request, either an inbound or outbound demo request. That's when they say, yes, I want to see the platform. And then all of our deals almost all of our deals go through a proof of concept. So then we measure POC and we measure close won revenue. So that became our new funnel. We rebuilt all that into Hockey Stack. So we're able to track that. We're able to track what percentage of people go from initial research to we actually break out pre-OC and POC. Pre-OC is they say they want to do a POC. POC in our world is they put the tag on their site and we start capturing data. And that takes about a month typically to get through that, because we're dealing with enterprise brands that have to go through security and a lot of other things. So anyway, the point is we rebuilt all that in Hockey Stack. That's how we're able to track that. And that's what I report every week back to the exec team. And because of that, it became very focused on pipeline, right? That was the best indicator I was working. So once we got to the end of the year, where I had everybody focused the whole year was, what kind of pipeline could we tie back to these efforts? And by the end of the year, we were able to tie back substantial. We called it inbound pipeline. We had outbound pipeline. We had pretty good numbers. Unfortunately, I can't share those numbers. But the other piece that gets overlooked in marketing is, we have clients, right? A big part of what we do also retains clients and gets them to buy more of our services, right? Classic land and expand. So we were able to keep our retention rate at 91% last year. We were able to have a net rate of retention of 110% with upsells. So we took partial credit of that, right? All the stuff we were doing. We do partner marketing. We do a lot of other things that drive those total numbers. So we operate as a single revenue team, but that focuses everybody on pipeline. And then obviously, our problem is our sales cycle is 7 months, 6.9 months on average, which means if I was reporting just on close one revenue, I'd have a really crappy story, right? Because I spent a lot of money this year that won't show up till next year. So I have to be able to put, pipeline's going to be the earlier indicator of that. The early indicator of that's going to be demo requests. Those are the three key things that we look at and try to justify where we spend money.
A lot of good insight there. Does, what was it called? Hockey Stack, does it de-anonymize at the person level or at the account level, corporate level?
We see just company level through the 6 Sense data there. Now we have been testing. We ran a 30-day test of our B2B, which is the person level. The interesting thing that we learned from 30-day test, and we're continuing on with the free version of that, and we may ramp it up. But what we learned from that more than anything was almost everybody who comes to our website is not somebody we'd want to work with because again, our audience is so small. And we have some blog posts that were produced 3 years ago that are very general terms. Technical stuff like how to tell if somebody has a content security policy on their website. That's our number one blog post. We get 2,000 or 3,000 visits a month. Virtually nobody in that would be somebody that we'd work with, and they're not going to that link. They're going to that because they're trying to answer that question, not because they're researching our solution. Now, if they get there and they go, oh, Blue Triangle, I haven't heard of it. What do they do? And they go research, great. But us doing any kind of follow-up on that person is not a good use of time. So that was what we learned from looking at person level data. And keep in mind, our B2B only gives you 20 to 30% of the people coming through. So we're still seeing a fraction of that. But our big take on it was we just don't get a lot. It's a needle in the haystack for us. And so we do much better. We pair our outbound with the inbound, but we base it more on a company level. If we see a company that's reaching that engaged stage, then we're going out and we're trying to find people at the company, and we do it based on titles, based on jobs, and we just start reaching out to them and trying to engage with them. And until, of course, they give us PII. If they sign up for a newsletter or whatever, now we have some indicator, but until then, we kind of got to guess a little bit on that. I'm sure that all that will get better over time. And again, if we had a larger media budget, we were able to drive more of our ICPs in. One of the things we did with our B2B was we went back and tweaked with the Google Tag Manager settings to eliminate pages like that blog post that gets 3,000 posts to not even look at it because we didn't want to use up the credits on the pages that don't matter. And they also have a feature where you can set hot pages. So we could do that to see what are kind of the more intent suggesting pages.
Maybe someone sent you a creative outbound piece of mail right there. I know you sent those as part of your campaigns. So thank you, FedEx guy, for the transition here. Walk me through some of the interesting plays that you've deployed either at this company or the last one where you did these out of the box strategies. I think you even might have a box that you could show us when it comes to speaking to the types of marketing plays and growth tactics that very few people deploy these days.
Yeah, it's one, maybe it's because I came out of traditional marketing background and worked with direct mail and B2B, and I used to do campaigns of 800,000 direct mail pieces, on the consumer side. Because of that, it was not that foreign to me when I got into B2B SaaS to say, if you're selling a product at a high enough value, right? So this wouldn't work if you're a, $20 a month product, right? But again, when you're dealing with our average contract values of 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 or more, you can afford to go and you're going after a finite audience. You want to, right. Your goal is to stand out and get their attention. One way we have found successful in the past is doing what I call three-dimensional direct mail. And I don't think I made up that term, by the way, but basically it's not like a postcard, right? This is something, a box. To your point, it generally is a box. I mean, you could use a bag, you could use some other carrier, but it's got to come in a carrier. It's got to be something that thuds when it hits the desk or requires FedEx to deliver it, that sort of thing. And so the idea is if you can get something that clearly pays off this point of view, gets them to understand your point of view and pay attention, and then use that to get the meeting, it becomes worth it. It's more expensive on a per piece basis. It is definitely, again, it fits with the book. It is an audience of one-to-one kind of marketing. So we had a campaign that it's a huge box. It was a 10-pound coffee cup. I would get it down. It's up there, but it's really huge. It was a 10-pound box. We had to make these in China, giant coffee cup. That was an evergreen campaign for us. We shipped 25 of those a month and we get 3 meetings out of that. That just became a standard. Every month we were picking new set and doing, and that was going after a mid-tier customer to get their attention. And that worked successfully. But the idea is it's something that's disruptive. It's pattern disruptive. And the example I gave you when we were chatting the other day was so I worked for a company that had an ad platform that we were doing something nobody had done before generally, which was being able to, at the time, tie your mobile phone to your home address, which allows me to tie to data so that if I knew you were a Coke buyer, but I was doing a campaign for Pepsi, I could run ads for Pepsi in apps that you're on and target you specifically. And then I could measure on the back end, did you go into a grocery store and spend more on Pepsi than the control audience? And then we could actually equate a return on ad spend to that. So that was really new back. This is a decade ago. This is super new back then and not done. And we were having trouble kind of getting that word out to our customers. So we came up with the idea, well, if it's, and part of it was we did some focus groups on it. There was a little bit of a believability issue. We said, well, what would make it believable? Well, let's offer a guarantee. Nobody had ever guaranteed an ad campaign, right? You run the ads, good luck. You can't control creative, can't control that stuff. We said, what if we guaranteed? Because we were seeing these return on ad spends of 300%, 400%, 500%. So we said, what if we ran a campaign and we guaranteed at the front end, after we saw, what the creative was, we could gauge it and say, look, we guarantee you'll produce at least a 200% return on ad spend. And if you don't, we'll give you a credit back, right? So it was nobody had ever done that in the industry. So we decided, let's launch that with a bang. So I went to our sales team and I said, look, I want you to give me 10 or 20, I think we gave each one 20 contacts that you have been doing outreach to for at least 6 months, unsuccessful in getting them to meet with you. And these have to be people buy the product that we're buying or the media and buy that kind of media for their clients. They're a good qualified prospect. They should be talking to us. You just can't get a meeting with them. And so out of that, we had 296 prospects for this campaign. That is a one-to-one campaign, right? That is not thousands. That's 296 people that we're going after. And again, this is pre-pandemic, so we could go to their offices, right? They were typically in their office. There's still ways to do it today after pandemic with people work from home. You have to add an extra step to verify the address, but you can still do it. So anyway, we shipped out, and I don't know, I know some of this will be on video, but I'll show you the box for anybody on video. So this is what the box was. And it just basically said, open the box. That's all it said. And it's got kind of a 007 kind of theme or feel to it. This is done by our agency, Waltz Teacher, out of Kansas City. They were awesome. This actually won an award. Not that that's important. Pipeline's more important, but awards are nice. Anyway, inside was a phone, an actual burner phone, basically, right? And on the phone, it actually says, turn on the phone. That's the instruction. So you peel off the little sheet, they turn on the phone, and the other pouch in there is actually the charger on the phone. And when the phone comes on, they're going to get an immediate text because we know who got which phone, right? So it's going to give them a text. In this case, we didn't have a BDR team in place, so it went from the salesperson. The salesperson sent the text that, hey, I'm looking forward to talking to you. I will call you within 24 hours. Just keep this phone by your desk. And we knew when it was delivered because it's delivered by FedEx. So we immediately sent notification. All this stuff could be automated today. We had to do it manual back then, but it's all automated now, where it would tell them, okay, make the call. They would then call on that cell phone, right? So we knew we had a way to get them to pick up the phone. And in that campaign, we were able to get 94 people to pick up that phone out of 296 people that we sent it to. That's pretty good odds. Right. One, by the way, side story on that was Volkswagen was one of our targets on that. And if you remember the whole Volkswagen scandal with the faking the catalytic converter thing and all that, it was right after that had all broken. And we shipped this box. They actually had it destroyed, had it blown up. They thought it was a bomb because they were getting all these death threats and things after the whole fiasco. But when we called, we actually connected with them and they apologized and they took the meeting anyway. So. Because they felt bad about blowing up our 3-dimensional direct mail piece. So anyway, with that piece, when we called them and we got them on a call, we said, look, this is all about a teaser campaign. So we said, look, we're doing something really revolutionary. I want to tell you about it. I just need 30 minutes of your time. If you will book an in-person meeting for 30 minutes, I'll come tell you about it. I swear it'll only take 30 minutes. That you may not need that burner phone. Most people already have a mobile phone. So if you don't need that phone, I will happily trade you out for an iPad, which again, 10 years ago, not a lot of people had. I'll give you an iPad instead, and I will take the burner phone and we're going to donate those to Ronald McDonald House because they could actually use those for parents that are living in the Ronald McDonald House and having their kids treated. So now you get a charity angle to it. They get the free gift that's worth a few $100. All I got to do is meet for 30 minutes. This is a quintessential today. You can get the $50 Amazon gift card or $100 Amazon gift card if you take a meeting, via WebEx or whatever. This is that version of that. And so we ended up getting 77 meetings out of those 94 people that would connect with us. Again, phenomenal meeting rate. And we actually closed $2 million in revenue from that campaign. And keep in mind, this is 77 meetings with people we've been trying for 6 months to get a meeting from and couldn't. And it was all about pattern interrupt, right? We got their attention and stood out from everybody else just by doing something so radically different. And people are doing it still today. It's so rare. People just don't do it, that it stands out. Unlike an AI email campaign that everybody's doing, right?
Bulk mail is hard to pull off with AI. The pieces are not there yet to automate that campaign quite yet. Yeah, I think you're doing some version of cold email, cold calling at your company. I think you're piloting cold calling with the parallel dialer. Maybe you can speak to it, but what have the results looked like doing the more traditional old school method of going direct to your audience without the bulky mail? Anything there that seems to be showing some sign of life, something that shows it's got legs?
Well, there's sign of life. The question is, does it have enough? Is it good enough to keep doing it? I'll start by saying the reason we're not doing 3-dimensional direct mail is because my budget is too small. That campaign was a $70,000 campaign to reach 296 people. That takes a bit of a budget. So we don't have that option. So we have to rely on other options. So yeah, we've tried the cold email. We've tried a number of different things. We've tried the cold email, the blast approach that works for everybody, set up the 20 domains and all that. Our data was not great on that. 55,000 emails netted, 17 replies. We got 12 or 14 people who would engage with us, request a lead magnet, and we got 2 meetings out of it. To me, that's not huge numbers. What we've more recently done is traditional cold calling. There's a new book out called Cold Calling Sucks. I think there's more to it. I can't remember what the rest of that sentence is, but cold calling sucks, something like, and that's why nobody does it. And that's the hard truth. Nobody likes to actually do cold calling. So it still is relatively new. So we've been testing the parallel dialer thing. And, in 2 weeks of dialing, he's gotten 4 meetings. That's pretty good. That's much, much better numbers than we've gotten on the email. Now, we happen to have an SDR who was he did a bunch of cold calling at his prior company. He's very good at it. You have to have the right hook. You have to have all that, but we're finding that to work a little bit better. I still am hopeful that something more bespoke, so thinking more one-to-one marketing, will actually be better. So we're also going out and targeting the 20 accounts we think would be the best fits for us and trying to go deep on those accounts, really try to do personalized outreach. We're creating, we can do some reports where we pull data from Google and our own data and show where they rank in terms of page performance. It's something very important that everybody cares about right now because Google cares about it. So we're working on the ability to produce a customized landing page with that, where it would have their scores and how they stack up to their competitors with specific recommendations. And we're going to try that in a little more bespoke. So we're trying, the world is changing. And what works now will not work in 6 months. It's getting, the loops are getting smaller. And so you have to constantly, that's why I listen to so many podcasts. I'm always stealing ideas. I have no new ideas, right? I'm stealing from everybody else. What's working? What are people doing? Because you've always got to be figuring out how to break through in this crowded world and get your message in front of the people and get them to take a look. And it's hard. It's really hard in the B2B SaaS world today.
Especially selling into enterprise with a universe of several hundred accounts. That's on expert mode. In video games, you have extremely hard mode selling into that kind of audience, and pulling it off and generating pipeline into that audience is not easy. I know you run a podcast. You have a co-host. For companies thinking about spinning up a media brand and taking it seriously to drive authority, thought leadership, expertise, get the requisite 55 plus touch points with their ideal customers before they're ready to buy and have a sales conversation, what do you think contributes to fostering an amazing radio show or program?
Well, I do think the host, I'm just going to sound self-serving, but I think the hosts do matter, right? You have to have a little bit of personality, right? Because nobody wants to listen to, and I'll be honest, occasionally we get the guest who agrees to be on, and we'll talk to them and go, oh my gosh, I don't think you have the personality for this. We've had a couple we've had to kind of go, I don't think this is a fit. So and if you're doing guests, the guests have to be interesting, right? But I think from the host standpoint, And again, I'm not the expert on web performance, right? I am relatively new to this industry, 2.5 years. I've been around it all my life, but I'm not going to be the expert, right? So I am the host, right? I'm the commentary. I set up funny jokes. I ask the questions. I introduce the guest. I do the wrap up. I'm kind of the wrapping of the piece, right? And then I needed an expert. I needed somebody who was a subject matter expert. We had a guy in the company, a guy named Nick Palladino, and he's our lead sales engineer. He actually came from Home Depot. He was a client and loved our platform so much, he ended up leaving Home Depot and coming to work for us. So he's got a great story, great compelling story, and he's just a funny guy. He's got a big personality and not an obnoxious way, a good personality, and is smart and all that stuff. So as I thought, and that's what you're going to have to do. If you want to do this, you got to think in your company, who do you have? It may not be the CEO. And, we have a great CEO. I don't think he would be the right guest to have on it. You probably don't want your head of sales because it comes across too salesy and they'll want to sell the whole time, right? So you got to find that right person. It's an SME. It might not be your head of engineering because they might just not have the personality. So it's a little bit of finding the right magic ingredient. But I suspected Nick would be right. So I reached out to him. And I actually slacked him. I sent a meeting inquiry, and I just slacked him and said, hey, I'm sending you a meeting inquiry. I just want to talk over an idea I have about a podcast, whatever. And he immediately slacked back. And this is like 9:00 at night his time. He's like, I'm in. That's awesome. And he starts coming up, and I'm going, okay, let's just wait for the meeting. We'll kind of talk through it. So he loved the idea. He loves doing the podcast. That in and of itself, you get somebody who really wants to do it, that's a big part of it. He's so into it that his enthusiasm comes through. So now we've honed after 26, 27 episodes, we've kind of honed our personalities. We laugh a lot. We have a bunch of jokes. We give each other a hard time. We know kind of how to do that. So you need kind of that rapport, and that's stuff the podcast experts will tell you. You need rapport with the guests, and that allows you to add co-hosted commentary. And then you can then bring in third-party experts, and then that comes out. So the way we set ours up is I come up with, and I work with the production company. We do the prep episode to find out kind of what angle they like, because we might have a technical person, we might have a marketing person, we might have a product manager, right? We deal with different audiences. So we try to find out what they're passionate about when it comes to delivering frictionless experiences. We then build the episode around that topic, build out some questions. And so when I ask the question, I pause because I know Nick, if it's a question and the guest says something that gets him, that he goes, oh, I love that. He'll go, I love the way you talk about that. And then he'll go off on a rant. I just kind of let him go. That's my job. And when he kind of winds down, I'm going, okay, well now blah, blah, blah. And I go to the next question. So my goal is just to get those guys talking. I'll joke, I'll comment, but that's the format that's worked for us. But key to kind of takeaways are you got to have, chemistry with your podcast host, the regulars. Those become your experts. So when we do co-hosted commentary, it's typically me asking him because he's the expert, right? So now I'm just interviewing Nick, but we do it in kind of a fun, engaging way. We'll bring in a social post. So there's a guy named Lenny. His name is hard to pronounce, but he does a newsletter called Lenny's Newsletter. It's all for product managers. So we'll take a topic of one of his newsletter and then build a whole episode around that and just talk about it. He did one on AI. What aspects of a product manager's job are going to be replaced by AI? So I just said, Nick, here's what Lenny thinks. What do you think? Oh, I disagree with that. Oh, I think that's right, spot on. Nah, I'm not sure about that. So we just, riff and have some fun. So.
Got it. So you have a topic that you both find interesting, that your ideal customers or market finds interesting, and you riff on it. And if you have conflicting, it's an even better radio show if you have something controversial or conflicting to say, or if you take a stand and the other co-host takes the other stand, it makes for a really good program. It sounds like you also invite ideal customers onto the show, partially because they have that subject matter expertise. Partially because they have the platform, right? They have their own base of followers and their own audience that can benefit both of you. And every now and then, serendipitously, pipeline might emerge from having someone on your podcast. And how that's happened in the past, I'm curious if they ask what you're up to, or if you ask them if they'd be open to providing feedback or insights on what you've built. or what you've been working on there the past 2.5 years. I'm curious how that conversation often unfolds to have built the hundreds of thousands in pipeline that you were talking about.
Yeah, certainly. So we have invited, especially at the beginning, we invited some of our customers, people that we knew really well that we could get to come on and talk. They inevitably end up talking about the product, which wasn't necessarily our goal. We didn't want this to become a pitch. And part of this was we didn't know how this was going to come off. I was deathly afraid this was going to be boring as heck, because you're talking about a really technical. When you start talking core web vitals and things like that, it can be very technical. What I have been pleasantly surprised is, because we tend to talk about stories and stuff, it's been super interesting. And I've had more people tell me, I'm not, an expert. I'm not a technical person, but I love that episode. I agree on this point, right? Anybody who's involved in building a website for a company and driving traffic to it gets some sort of benefit out of it. And then they find it somewhat engaging and more interesting. So even within our own company, we encourage our employees to listen to it. People in CS and other places that are not technical people love the podcast as well. So we'll sometimes have our customers. We'll obviously want to invest because we want experts from all over the industry. So we will put together a list of companies we think would be really interesting to get perspective on. Our production company helps us identify interesting people within that are in the kind of job roles, either product or engineering or DevOps or marketing, that would be able to speak to it. And we look at things like their LinkedIn following, and are they posting on LinkedIn? Do they seem to have an opinion? Have they done other podcast episodes? That would tell us that they're kind of a good fit. And then we just reach out and invite them to be on the podcast. What we do is we always book a prep call, a 30-minute prep call. We do that, again, one, to evaluate, to make sure they are a good fit and they're comfortable with it. Not all of them have done podcasts before, so we have to work through some of the technical, we work on Riverside, blah, blah, how it will work. But we also use that opportunity to kind of pull out and decide what topic is going to resonate with them, that they're particularly passionate about. We do not give the questions in advance because that tends to make for stilted interviews. We tried it. That didn't work out. So we talk generalities and we come up with a couple topics they're passionate about. We kind of build that around it. In the course of that conversation, I do have to kind of explain what the frictionless experience is, how it relates back to Blue Triangle. Sometimes they don't even get that there's a connection. So I just explain, look, we both work for the company. Here's what the company does. This is why we built the podcast. This isn't a commercial for the product or whatever. In the course of that discussion, sometimes it becomes curious about what the product does. If they're curious, we're happy to talk about it. If they aren't, we don't push it. But at minimum, we've gotten to somebody in their company, and the people who listen to the podcast are other people in their company. So we've gotten that brand awareness, we've gotten in there. And if they start to understand what we do and it's a good fit, awesome. If they don't, not the end of the world. The main goal is to get that great content out of it. And again, we tend to go, because we're going after enterprise brands, we tend to go for well-known consumer brands, mostly consumer brands. But we had like the head of B2B for Verizon. So, we'll do some B2B topics. We'll occasionally invite authors on topics, things like that. But most of the time we're looking for practitioners, people, so we've had guests from American Eagle and Walmart and Experian and Wyndham Hotels and brands you would know, talking about stuff they know about, because that's what our audience then learns from. And our goal is they listen to podcast episode, they go back and they get 2 or 3 ideas or things to do. So, that they could do in their own world. So that's kind of the goal. It's gotta be, content marketing is too often marketing, not enough content. We try to err more on the side of content. We'd rather be really interesting content, because over time, if they hear about Blue Triangle enough, and they understand we do something with friction, when they're having a friction problem, at least they'll come check us out. That's our goal, right?
You'll be top of mind.
That's
exactly, because they've had the requisite 50 some odd touch points.
Exactly.
So that you are right there when they think of the problem, they think of you. So last question. I noticed you have the book in the background there. Any advice for aspiring authors would like to, at some point, write a book and facilitate their company growth or their career ascension, using the book as a tool to make that happen?
Well, it's easy enough for anybody to write a book. And I will say that's how we started the process. We were going to do this as a self-published book. So Jamie, my co-author, and I've known Jamie for 30 years. We go way back. He's an expert in marketing. He's written other books. And we were doing some work together with the company that I was at the time, 4Info, and I had just learned so much. And I was out speaking in the industry. I was writing for industry publications about this topic of digital identity and how that translates to one-to-one marketing. And we realized, maybe there's some interest here that it would make sense to write a book. So we started out thinking this would be self-published. Maybe 4Info would publish it, and we'd use it as a lead magnet. We'd use it as a three-dimensional direct mail, right? Give them a copy of the book, that sort of thing. That was the original plan. And as we got in, we wrote about 3 or 4 chapters. I don't know if this is the way to do it because Jamie was my guide on this, and he's got the experience. But we wrote 3 or 4 chapters and came up with the outline for the book. And that one we were kind of on our own schedule because we were doing it, part-time, that kind of thing. I'd say it probably took us 6 months to get 3 chapters in the outline of it. And then he knew how to package that up and take that to book companies. And part of that was in the middle of all this, stuff was making headlines about digital identity and all the privacy laws and all that. And we ended up getting interviewed by a reporter from Wall Street Journal because we were working on this book, because we were experts in digital identity. And we were just like, okay, this is a big topic. So let's take it out to some publishers. So we sent it to 3 publishers. We got 2 offers, and we ended up going with McGraw-Hill was the publisher. And then once we had a contract and payment and all that, now we had to actually deliver. That's when the hard part became, because we had to go write the other 10 chapters or 14 chapters of the book. And we had a deadline. I think it was about 6 months. I can't even remember, but I think it was about a 6-month deadline to deliver first draft. That's when it became hard. So what I would say to people is, it's not as hard as you think, and it's hard as you think, right? Because in the thick of it, and in the last 3 months, I was literally, working all day. I had a day job. I'd had dinner with the family, and then I'd come in the office. I'd write for 3 or 4 hours. I'd finish up at midnight, 1 o'clock. I'd get up at 6 the next morning and start it over. Weekends were all on the book, and it was hard. It was like, I imagine it's a lot like having a baby. You get down to that final trimester and it's awful for the woman, right? And it's just, you never want to do this again. And then when you have the baby, it's so wonderful. All that pain goes away. Same sort of thing. Once we had the book and you have the, an actual printed copy and all that, now you're going out and doing the book tour and people can buy the book and you update your LinkedIn. That's the fun part. But you could do it in a self-published world. Anybody could publish a book. The benefit of publishing with an author was they did promotion for it. It's professionally done. They gave us editors. We went through several rounds of editing. They did all the typesetting, the layout. Jamie ended up doing he's got a bit of an artistic skill. He did all the illustrations on it for the book. But I will say, from a credibility standpoint, it helps, right? People, to be a published author is great. I have no qualms with it. And what's awesome about this book is because of the topic, it's really a manual. We wrote it intentionally. We went into it with the first third was very high level, great for even a CEO to get. The second one was more at the practitioner level of sort of the methodology behind it. And the last third of the book was super technical. If you have to execute on it, read this part of the book, read the whole thing. But the CEO will never read that part of the book, right? That was kind of the thinking and the way we built the book. But because we laid it out, the whole thing, there's no other book in academia for this. And one-to-one marketing is now a thing, right? And digital identity and understanding how you could do that and how you can target individuals and what goes into that. And so it's now used in the curriculum at multiple colleges in the business program for marketing because there was no such book in colleges. So I've actually guest lectured at some colleges, which is kind of fun. And people coming up through the industry reading the book, it's kind of cool, and it's all foundational. Even though the technology has changed, even as we submitted the manuscript, Google came out with their announcement about deprecating third-party cookies and all that. And of course, now full story, 2 years later or 2.5 years later, they said, we changed our mind. But if we had written about the specific technology, it'd be outdated. We instead wrote the principles that are somewhat timeless, at least for now.
So smart, writing a future-proof book, focusing on the principles at hand and not the tactics and channels necessarily, because those are going to change. Cold outbound principles on, say, email, it's probably going to change. Cold, right? Meta display ads, probably going to change. Probably going to be a new channel. So, yeah, very smart play, focusing on the broader strategy and the principles at play, not the tactics, not the growth hacks that I know a lot of marketers want, but they don't stand the test of time more often than not. Chuck, I know we can go so much more into detail on so many different themes. Maybe we can reserve that for a future episode, but where can people find you? Where can people look you up online or connect, reach out to you? Where do you want to point people towards?
Yeah. So LinkedIn is technically I'm on Twitter, but I tweet about once every 2 months. It's just not my channel. LinkedIn, I'm posting multiple times a week, trying to share out knowledge, like on ungating and stuff like that. So feel free to definitely follow me, and happy to reach out and connect. Unless you want to sell me something, then, you just follow me, but happy to connect. And I'm always happy to help people, and happy to do that. So LinkedIn is probably the best place to reach me there. Obviously the podcast, if you listen, it's the Frictionless Experience. So frictionlessexperience.com, or on your favorite podcast player app, you'll find us and subscribe to that. And then the book, if you want to buy a copy of the book, that's available on Amazon or wherever you get books. And it's called An Audience of One.
Beautiful. Chuck, super appreciative of your time, sharing your insight, hard-won knowledge, and lessons learned. So until next time, thank you. Great to see you, and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, Chris. This was fun.